Welcome to Eggs, the podcast, featuring the best and brightest minds in business leadership, entrepreneurship, and technology. On today's episode, we'll talk about building a successful game server hosting business with BisectHosting Co-Founder and CEO Max Podkidkin. Max is a true authority in gaming server hosting technology. Founding his company in 2011, he's literally seen it all, and in the meantime built a global hosting operation that provides high quality and affordable hosting for mini games, but specifically the hugely popular Minecraft. Today, we'll discuss what BisectHosting is doing differently to rectify an industry-wide wrong by putting an outsized focus on customer service. Additionally, we'll be diving into the top 5 game server hosting mishaps, how to choose the right server solution, emerging hosting technology trends, and so much more. Now, let's level up with BisectHosting CEO Max Podkidkin. Hey, Max, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thrilled to death to have you. Thanks for making the time.
Yeah, not a problem. Glad you guys made time for me.
So how did you get into game hosting? And I've heard of like hosting websites and providing services like that. I've heard about Minecraft hosting, but it's kind of interesting to think of just someone randomly getting into it. So can you tell us your backstory?
Yeah, it is super random. I feel like I had this conversation so many times because even with friends and family, they're like, what do you do? Like, I'm still pretty sure my parents aren't 100% sure, 11 years later, but at least they left me alone about getting a real job. But so when Minecraft was released, I think it was around 2010, it was functional, you could play it. And I started, somebody showed it to me. I was like, what is this? This looks super weird, but I'm like, sure, I'll try it. And I played it. It was fun for maybe a day. I used some file editor that I found to edit the game files to give me all the diamonds I wanted. So I kind of, had nothing else to do. And I got bored very quickly. I was like, this is awesome. Because I always loved open world game, Grand Theft Auto is probably my most favorite game series ever, just because of the open world. So this is sort of similar, where you can kind of do whatever you want, anywhere you want. Obviously, sort of similar, but also extremely different. And then I haven't touched it for a while, and then somebody introduced me. They're like, hey, you can play online on these servers, and I'm like, sure, I'll try it. And then I literally, since then, the time just flew, because playing online with other people made it so much more fun, because you can build together, you can go mining together, you can go hunting together, you can gather resources together. It just made it so much more fun. And with Minecraft, it's with the perpetual worlds, it's not like all these, Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, all these other games that were super popular, still are. You sort of play a match and you're kind of done. And next time you're playing, you're starting over. With this, you're always coming back. You can literally build your own world within the game. So I started playing on the server with all these other people that I met, and it was, friendships formed. I spent a lot of time on it, hanging out with the people. And then the server had issues. It went offline. And I've always been interested in technology in general. If I'm at home, since I had my first computer, if I'm at home, I'm probably on my computer doing something. So I was like, let me see how this all works. And I, learned how to start your own server on your computer. So I'm like, let me try doing that. So I started the server, invited all these other people that were waiting for this other server to get back online. And I was like, this is fun, started adding plugins, and it kind of, people hung around. And then the other server came back online, and I was like, all right, time to, shut this down. And people are like, no, please keep it. We built all this stuff. We have all this. I'm like, this is killing my home connection. Back then, my upload was terrible. I'm like, we can't have more than 5 people online. So then I was like, fine. I'm like, let's, if you guys are willing to pitch in a couple bucks each, I'll buy a server from a host, and we'll do this properly. So that's what we did. That server kept growing, and throughout the journey of that server's growth, we used shared hosting. Then we used a VPS server. Then we had rent out a dedicated server where it's just for us. And then we even bought our own hardware and sent it off to a data center to be hosted in. And through that entire journey, like it felt like with hosting companies, the customer service is just never great because a lot of it is so much offhand. Because while it's true, like most of this, if you have issues, a lot of the times it's, on the customer's end. And as a host, most hosts will be like, that's not our problem. It's whatever code, whatever software, whatever you put on the server, that's what's causing your problem. You're kind of on your own, which is kind of understandable from their point of view. They can't deal with all these issues. But for gaming servers, I felt like it was very, it's very different where like the audience is completely different. You're not dealing with like very techy people who can research and figure this stuff out. You're dealing with a lot of much younger audience who need a lot of assistance. They need a lot of handholding and they have very little patience. So I was like, hey, I met my business partner on the server I had. He actually lives in the UK. His name's Andrew and he's our CTO. And I was like, hey man, let's try doing this for ourselves because I think we can do it much better. Like I've always loved when no matter where you are, like when you get good customer service, it just makes the whole product service like so much better. And since day one, that's kind of been, our number one focus is just providing 24/7 support with like super quick average reply times. Right now, we're like around 15 minutes or less on average. And like, again, our customers blame us all the time, even though, 99% of the time the issue is with either the game mechanics, the plugins they added, the mods, but we never like blame the customer and say like, hey, it's the plugin you're using, figure it out. We educate our staff to make sure we can assist, even if it's an issue with like a third-party piece of software or a game. Like we're always there, willing to help them 24/7, and that's since day one. And what we also have done since day one is it used to be only Minecraft. We started keeping 7 days of backups of every single server. So then if somebody does mess something up because, they're messing with a plugin mod or just anything else, or even somebody comes in and destroys their server for fun, that can be fixed. And that was also like very huge and popular. Nobody really had that back then. Like now more hosts have that feature as well, but we kind of did that from the start.
So yeah, that's cool. I mean, it's kind of a for gamers, by gamers kind of mentality, which I think is kind of interesting. I've noticed a technological divide in like my kids' age versus kids my age, people my age, in that as I was coming up, the computers were just sort of getting popular and gaming on computers was just becoming available and all that stuff was like all the technology was growing. But like we were growing with it, right? So we had to stay up on it. And if you wanted to be active in it, you needed to understand how to program for the web or how to do software development or whatever it was you wanted to do. If you wanted to participate, you had to learn to build it. And now, like with younger kids, especially like my oldest is 16, those guys get credit for being really good with technology. But the reality is they don't really know anything about technology. They just know how to use the technology that's been built for them. So I think to your point about having younger people, or younger customers who maybe don't have the tech skills and don't have that knowledge, having people who can sort of mentor them or take them through that is a really great insight or a really interesting way of doing business.
That's actually such a good way of putting it because I never really thought about it that way, but it's so true. And even like, sometimes I play with my nephews and I'm like, why don't you have more interest in how this works? Like, why, like all they want to do is play Minecraft on like Xbox, but I'm like, PC is so much better. The Java version is so much better. You can add all these plugins, mods, customization. Like you can learn even, like sort of like even changing some of the configuration files is almost like a very, very tiny introduction to software development or coding. And then, which some did start, even, they started a server and then started learning Java, creating their own plugins. But even just like as a tiny introduction, just managing a server, it does seem, I'm like, I'm like, when I was your age, I was like, I would be so interested in this. And yeah, that makes sense. Where like
it's funny,
they know, like they know how to use it, but they don't know how it works.
Yeah, it came clear to me. My wife teaches in a junior high, and she was telling me that she was having trouble because these kids don't even understand sort of fundamental technology down to things like file naming, for example, and folder structure and things like that. And she was running into problems every year because these kids are so used to just being able to whip out their iPhone and search for whatever it was they're looking for. Or, now search technology is getting pretty good, so they can get into Google Drive and just look for a word or whatever. But for the longest time, when they were trying to find a document, they would get into these kids' computers and there's just like a folder with like 10,000 documents called untitled, right? Because nobody knew how to save anything. Nobody knew how to do anything because they never had to save anything, right? The phone just does it for them, or the, Google Doc or whatever will just save for them. So there's no need to remember to save.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of an interesting thing, because you don't think about it. You think of these young people as being tech experts or wizards with the technology. That's why so many 14-year-olds were getting hired to run Twitter for companies for so long. But it's like they don't know how to build Twitter. They just know how to run Twitter. So it's an interesting thing.
Yeah, I literally never thought about it that way. And it almost like I thought about it as in like this, it never made sense to me. I'm like, like why don't some of these people like know how to do this stuff a little bit more? But it's so true that they know how to use it, but like the how to work it or like use it better. It's like you said, we grew up with it. We had to learn with it. Everything was new. We try to keep it organized, nice, like treating it as like this brand new thing. Almost like put it up on a pedestal sort of thing.
Well,
and right now it's like taken for granted. It's like, yeah, it's here, whatever.
Well, yeah, it's like early in the internet, right? If you wanted to be on the web, you had to learn how to build something in HTML, right? But to do that, you need to know file structure. You need to know file naming conventions. You need to know, so you learn how to organize things because this is how you had to do it for the web, right? If you wanted to be present. Now you can just go to Wix and build a better website than I ever could and do it with no code,
Yeah, we had GeoCities, they have Wix.com.
Right.
I wanted to unpack your kind of like your learning history of hosting and servers and stuff, and the fact that you started with your own self-hosted server on your computer. That's what a lot of people would do back to host a website back in the day, and to do the same thing with the game. It intrigues me that was the first step, and then you moved to shared hosting, and then you moved to a dedicated host server, and then you went from there to even sending them your own hardware and having them manage the hardware for you. And I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know you could send your own hardware in to do that. That's pretty cool. I have hosted websites and spun up servers on the node before. I've never done it for a Minecraft game or a game at all. I'm honestly, I'm not that much of a gamer, so forgive me. But
how dare you?
Yeah, right. Can you talk about like the learning curve of figuring that out, like how to host your own server, then figuring out, oh, let's go to Linode and do it there, and then why you would want someone to, like, I don't know if it's Linode or someone else that's managing the actual hardware for you, but actually buying your own hardware and sending it in. Why would you want to go that route?
Yeah, so it's just in terms of capacity and like how much basically processing you have access to. So I think a really good analogy that I like to use, just describing, like when you look at your servers live in a data center in racks, so you can have anywhere, from a few to probably, like, I don't know, like 40 servers stacked in a rack. So each like server is basically a computer. It's just built to be, it's just flat and long, so you can stack and fit many of them into the same rack. So typically you like refer to one system as a dedicated server. So when you're getting a dedicated server to yourself, you're going to pay a lot of money for it to rent it out, because you have the entire system to yourself. You're not sharing it with anyone else. So I like to look at dedicated servers is almost like having a house. So you're like, well, I guess you're not buying a house. So it's more like you're leasing a like leasing a house, you're renting a house. It's very expensive because you have the entire house to yourself, but also you have all the room, all the resources are only for you. They're not shared with anybody else. Versus then you have the level below, you have a VPS server, which essentially is a dedicated server that is shared with many, people. So it's more of like a condo where on a VPS server, everyone is running their own separate OS. So you have your own operating system, you have full shell access to it with like SSH, you can do whatever you want. So basically you have almost the same level of access as having a dedicated server, and you can manage it almost the same way, but you're sharing the resources of that dedicated server with everyone else. So it's sort of like, have your condo in a condo building and you share all the resources. So if one person does something, above you and there's a leak and they're using too much processing power or whatever, that's going to affect you. And then below VPS servers is shared hosting, which is even like, again, sort of like VPS servers where like dedicated servers shared by many different people, but it's even a cheaper option. So it's like an apartment, but you use it for one thing and one thing only. So like a shared Minecraft server, you can only use it for Minecraft and nothing else. And there's almost no customization. So like in an apartment, you can maybe paint the walls, but you can't like, take out a wall, change the layout or whatever. So as the server that I had, as it grew, we just needed more and more processing power. So that's why we started with shared hosting. Then we needed a little bit more. So we got the VPS server, so more power and more control. And then it outgrew that. And when we got the dedicated server, and Andrew, my business partner, he is the one that helped to manage all that because I like do not know Linux. And he did. So I was like, hey, I'm like, and that's why it worked really well for us because, we had like a very different set of skills where I was more interested in the business side of things and he was more interested in the like the managing the hardware side of things. And that's how it is today. And then right now we own most of our hardware. So we purchase physical servers and we ship them to data centers across the world to be hosted. It's called co-located. So you co-locate at a data center. We do rent at some locations because some are either like too expensive to ship to, or like impossible to ship to, or it just doesn't make sense. And also just to have like a balance of rented and owned, because the rented ones we can, kind of ramp up and ramp down really quickly. If we all of a sudden don't need a bunch of nodes, we can get rid of them. And if we need a lot more, we can also, rent more. But when purchasing hardware, it takes much longer. It takes, anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks to get the hardware, then we have to set it up. So it's just a much longer process. Obviously, in the long run, it's much better. But it's a huge capital investment from the start.
So I understand why it would be cheaper instead of renting and paying other people to maintain it and you own it. Can you give us maybe, we don't need exact figures, but I have zero idea of what it would cost to what kind of data we're talking about going through your server, how many gigs of storage you need on this thing, like what are we talking about in your setup? Like how many servers do you have? I assume that you have them spread out in different data sets around the world just to help for performance and connectivity for people who are playing, who might be in like Australia or be in Florida or whatever, wherever they're playing, they have a quicker connection if it's closer to them. What kind of pricing are we talking about to host a Minecraft server? How much would it cost per month?
So would we pay if you're renting a server, the prices are available online. It's anywhere from probably like, low, like $120 to $250 a month. If you're like leasing a server or renting a server from company, there's tons of them all over. And if you're purchasing a server, it depends what you're getting, and it could be anywhere. Typically, they're between like $1,700 to like $2,500 a server. Could be more, could be like well into like 3,000 plus, depending again like what processors you have, how many processors you have per node, like what RAM you're using, and so on. Because if you have like higher like if you have more processing power, you can put in more RAM, and then you need more hard drive space. But for hosting itself, actually the biggest cost is power.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest expense. So typically, the data centers will charge you for both for power and data, but power is definitely like way, way more expensive. And it's, we typically pay several thousands of dollars for like a full rack to host of our own hardware.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting. I mean, obviously there are a lot of variables here, right? So it's difficult to pin it down, but I think it's good to just sort of understand the range that we're talking about. Can we talk a little bit about just sort of your journey as a CEO and building up this company and some of the challenges that, this type of hosting would incur in trying to build out a business and scale the company? Like, what are you guys doing to try and grow the business, and what problems are you seeing or mistakes have you made along the way?
Yeah. So my journey I kind of went from nothing to, having this company. Like I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. It took me 8 years to get a bachelor degree because I took a million breaks, went part-time to full-time, taking breaks, a year off here, a year off there. I used to worked for 5 years at this factory first as an assembler, then a technician. And then at the same time, I was working at Best Buy for 6 years. But I always wanted to have something of my own. Like I tried, doing like a car detailing business before, because I always like cars, like taking care of mine. Yeah. And then I started this, and then kind of everything else just, was kind of forgot about it because I was so interested in this. And I started this while I was still finishing up school, and that the school definitely suffered because of this, because I was way more interested in taking care of this than studying or tests or whatever I needed to do. But yeah, everything I learned is, kind of on the job with doing this. And there was a lot. I think the biggest challenge that I didn't think would be as challenge. I knew it would be hard, but it is way harder than I thought, is actually finding good staff for the business, just like finding good employees. At the beginning, I think the first couple of people we hired really literally found them online. We're like, hey, like we have this company. Do you want a job? They're like, yes. And we're like, okay, cool. Do you know Minecraft? They're like, yes. I'm like, awesome. You want to start tomorrow? And that was like our interview process. And that has certainly involved, and we learned, a lot. Like you literally really have to weed people out to find the, and like have really good interviews, even for, your just to support positions, because at the end of the day, these are customer facing people. And if we care about support so much, like they have to be really good at their jobs. And I found it's very hard to do. We had people that we thought were awesome literally last just couple days in the job. And because they were just either good talkers during their interviews, but when they're actually started working, we're like, wow, like you're, literally terrible. And I think another issue with it is just working from home. Not everybody's used to it. So we had a lot of people where, it's their first job from home, and they think it's going to be very easy, but you have to be, like on top of yourself, making sure you're actually doing what you're supposed to. Because we had people definitely slack off, not even show up. We had people like, oh, like I had to go, take care of my kids. We're like, that's fine, and I feel for you, but you, like, if you're scheduled to be here, you have to show up. You can't just not show up.
Yeah.
And then people have internet issues sometimes questionable if it's real or not, but we try to believe them. We hope they're not lying. But at the end of the day, we're like, look, it's remote. You have to get used to it. You have to be here. Like if you don't have reliable internet, which I compare to like having reliable transportation. If if you had a job and you had to go somewhere and you don't have reliable transportation and you can't get there, they're probably going to fire you. So like, this is no different. If you can't get to work, like, we rely on you. So I think just finding really good talent has been like surprisingly difficult, especially in the US, because again, we used to hire people from like all over, no matter what state you're in, but then it became so difficult because if you have one person in a state, it's such a pain in the ass because you have to set up for state payroll, taxes, local taxes, like if county taxes, if applicable, and it makes the process so difficult. So now we kind of just stick to a few states, and even then, it's like so much to handle because every state is very different. Some states are like like electronic stuff. You can pay taxes electronically. You can set it up all of this electronically. Some of them you have to do this manually. Like you literally have to fill out documents by hand and fax it in, and that's the only way they'll take it, which is like crazy to me.
Yeah. That dealing with the individual states' rules and regulations and the tax rates and the payroll nonsense, it would be a nightmare. But on the other hand as well, I could imagine doing customer service and taking care of thousands of teenagers and managing all that stuff. That's another nightmare as well. Can you maybe talk about figuring that out, how to handle questions and requests and problems on the other end, and billing from your customers? Have you found a software solution for that, or did you create your own?
So for like the billing end, we use a system called WHMCS, which is pretty standard in like the hosting world. It's used by a lot of hosts because it has like a lot of stuff you need built in. But just dealing with, I think the hardest thing is getting people to actually, if they need help, to actually reach out to us, because if you like, we have tons of like great reviews on Trustpilot, and then if you look all our bad ones, it's literally people complaining about not being able to do something, and we like look into it and reply to every single review we get, good or bad, and then we look into the bad ones. And I would say 90% of the time, the people that left a bad review never contacted us. They never reached out, never made a support ticket or anything. So like we always, try to like make it as clear as possible to our customers. Like, look, like no matter what the issue is, whether you think it's on our end or the game's end or whatever it is, like reach out to us, like we'll help you out. So I feel like that's always been a struggle. Like me personally, like I hate seeing those reviews, especially then seeing that a customer never reached out. But again, we're dealing with gamers. I think the patience is very, very thin, and they sometimes will even have, instead of asking for a refund, a lot of times we'll even refund outside our normal refund period, because at the end of the day, like if you're not happy, for like, we're just rather you take your money and like not be upset with us. Like that's totally fine. But people will buy a server and like not be able to figure it out, and literally like an hour later just file a dispute on PayPal or Stripe, which is insanely expensive to us, because now both platforms, like they charge you whatever the bank fee charges you, and there's like a Stripe fee for the disputes, but now they don't give you back the whatever fee they charge. They just keep it. You only get the refund amount. So if somebody, and our average transaction size is pretty small, so if somebody buys like, I don't know, like $20 server and then files a dispute and we pay a $30 fee on it, yes, we get our $20 back, but we don't get the 30 back. So we're still losing money. And I think it's, again, a lot of it has to do with just audience we deal with. Sometimes we get parents call in, they're like, hey, my son used my credit card to buy the server. I just realized, I had it for a long time, which we like when that happens because at least we can talk to them, we can issue a refund, do whatever is needed, versus, you know, somebody just filing disputes on like 10 different transactions and costing us a ton of money.
Yeah, that would get rather frustrating.
Yeah, but overall, like, we just try to do, you know, be like super empathetic, you know, tell them like, we understand, you know, sorry you're having this issue with whatever it is, like, we're going to help you resolve it, walk them through it, you know, if needed, like do research if it's a new issue. But most of the issues we've seen so many times, and our staff is very educated on them, so we can help them pretty quickly. Just, you know, we just try to do a lot of hand holding.
Yeah, it makes sense.
No, I think that's great. And I think it's really important for a lot of the reasons we've laid out. So that's cool that you guys put a little extra emphasis on that. I wanted to ask you too, and this is just going to show my naivete, but I wanted to ask you a little bit about just sort of your entrepreneurial journey, in the sense that you said you always started like little businesses and stuff like that when you were young. I know that you are of, I think it's Belarusian descent, and you immigrated here pretty young. I wondered, is the sort of entrepreneurial culture the same over there as it is over here? Or is this sort of like an American thing that you found attractive?
I think I remember very little because I feel like, you know, I definitely see myself as like growing up here because, you know, whatever memories, friends I had, you know, I moved when I was 12. So everything before that is kind of, it just gets blurrier and blurrier. But I think overall, there's definitely, you kind of have to, it's not so much like mindset where like, oh, like I want to start my business, like do this and that. I think this was also like a very long time ago. I'm 37, 38 now. So this was many, many years ago. And I feel like the world is much more globalized, because from like some of the childhood memories that I remember, I like, you know, would seem crazy right now. Like, this is very super random, but like when we lived over there, like I had like regular Coca-Cola out of a can one time in the first 12 years of my life. And it was like one of the most exciting days of my life. And I still remember it, but it was just so rare. Like we would get like the 2-liter bottles, and usually only around the holidays, because again, world was much less globalized. It was very expensive. And I've never seen anything out of a can. And it was like the coolest thing to me as like probably like a 9 or 10-year-old child. But I think a lot of people have the mindset of just like having to hustle, at least back then, probably not so much now, just to survive, to have money to like provide for their family. So I know it has been both of my parents like blue collar workers, but I even remember, you know, when we lived there, like my dad would always do all these random jobs and things just to provide for us. So I just, you know, I just think seeing that and learning, just being more self-sufficient, like I'm like very handy. And I think it's because like my dad was like, you know, like I can work on my car, I can work like with wood, like did a lot of this office myself. And a lot of the friends that grew up here like don't really have those skills, because it's you could just pay somebody to do it. But over there, like you could pay somebody to do it, but it was so expensive. Like it was just better to learn and do it yourself. Like throughout the whole, I have a Model 3 now, so I don't have to worry about oil changes. But throughout like my entire driving career, I've only paid for an oil change one time. And I was like really upset that I had to do it. And because before I did all the oil changes myself, did all the, you know, brakes myself, anything that did not require a lift, I just did it myself. Like I learned a lot of it from my dad, because, you know, that's what he did as well. So because we couldn't afford, even after moving here, to just like go and pay mechanics, you know, like $500 to do a brake job, when you can just do it yourself for, you know, probably like a couple $100 easily. And so it's either that or then learning from YouTube. Like I like to say, you know, if I get YouTube DIY certified if I need to complete something. So I think a lot of it comes from that, where, you know, I always wasn't sure what I wanted to do, because nobody, like my parents didn't have careers. They had jobs, they never had careers. So maybe that's why I didn't know what I wanted to do, because I, you know, had no like any footpaths to follow. But, you know, I saw the hustling and, you know, wanted to do something myself even have my own business or something along those lines.
Yeah, no, I think it's just always interesting to explore that stuff, and that's why I asked the question, is just because, I think that over here in this country anyway, we kind of take for granted this idea of entrepreneurship and that you can really go, but, and obviously the world's changed quite a bit. I think in Eastern Europe now, I mean, we talk to people from, over there that, do web hosting or programming or software development, whatever, there's a lot of tech in that area now. That certainly wasn't there probably when you were a kid, but so it's interesting how it's evolved and how, to your point, everything's become more globalized, but I do think that there's, some value in recognizing your cultural heritage, and even if you weren't living over there, you did grow up with parents from there, and, and so there's sort of some cultural aspects that you might pick up. So this idea of hard work and that sort of stuff is really interesting to me. Thanks.
No, 100%. Yeah. But it's certainly different. Like you said, there's tons of like great developers there and everything now, but when I was there, like it was not that, I haven't touched. The closest I had to like anything resembling a computer is, I believe it was like a Commodore 64, but not a Commodore 64. It was like some sort of a weird like Soviet knockoff or something. And that's the closest thing I had, where like I had, everybody, like I had friends with like consoles. It was similar to Nintendo, but it wasn't Nintendo. Again, it was some sort of like either for that market or a knockoff. But like we couldn't afford it. So I had this like weird Commodore 64 thing and load games on using tapes. It was but that was like my first introduction to, anything that resembles a computer, and I loved it. So
when you said that you hadn't had a soda from a can, made me think of the Philippines. I lived there for a little while, and they all still did the glass bottle exchange. And instead of giving you the glass bottle, if it was like a smaller, the 2 liters, the bigger ones, they'd let you take home and they'd give you a deposit when you brought it back. But the smaller ones, they would literally just pour into a plastic bag and stick a straw on it and send you on your way. I was wondering if we could get back into server world and talk about Minecraft in particular, because there seems to be a lot of different customizable features and settings and things that you can have specific for Minecraft. I jumped on Linode just to set up a Minecraft server, just to walk through the steps and see what features or whatever you could enable. And there's stuff like flight enabled, netherworld enabled, player achievements enabled, maximum players, player idle timeout limit, difficulty level, PvP enabled. There seems to be like a lot of different settings that you could enable or disable or really customize your world. I've never played Minecraft, so I don't really know all the ins and outs about it, but where you're a provider, do you allow the players to kind of customize the server settings, or do you give them kind of like this is what we offer, this is what you get, have fun?
Yeah, so like the list you named is literally like calling it the tip of the iceberg would be like a huge understatement.
Sure.
Because those are just like the very default, as it's called, like vanilla Minecraft, as it comes out the box sort of thing, like settings. But like I think what Minecraft made what it is today, I think they have around, I mean, it's the world's most downloaded game, which is insane. I think there's like probably around 200 million players monthly now. But I think what made it what it is today is because of the modding community, just like a insanely massive and just community of developers. Because it all started somebody made a piece of software that allowed, to make plugins for Minecraft, which would allow you to change, like, you can add like an economy plugin to your game. So you can like have currency, so you can sell different blocks or trade blocks. You can add a plugin like Townie used to be like huge, where like you can create your own towns. There's a factions plugin And then there's literally thousands of different ones that just add so many different features. And that's just plugins. Now there's, mod packs are super popular. We're sort of known for hosting mod packs and modded servers. We know them really well. We're partnered with a lot of mod pack creators. But with mod packs, you can even, not only add different functions to the game, but you can add different blocks, different machines. You can add computers. You can add like cameras, solar panels. Like, there's all these crazy mod packs that, just anything you can think of. There's probably a mod pack that does it. Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of customization, and we allow it all. Versus, if somebody wants to add some plugins or mod packs, like you can do it all with us. In fact, like, I think right now we host like 23 different games, and if any of the games we host supports mod pack like mods, we allow it, because I think that's what makes them makes the game so awesome, just allowing users to change all that.
When you say 23 different games, are you saying 23 different worlds that you've created that you host and people can join and play? Is that how that works? It's like they can pick a world and go to it and make changes, or how does it work?
No, we just host, there's literally like 23 different games, like Terraria,
Oh,
Core
okay,
Keeper,
okay, all right.
Factorio. Yeah, so you can
I
get.
thought it was the worlds inside Minecraft that you
No,
were
this is
okay.
just for different games. Yeah, for Minecraft, like if you have mod pack plugin that generates different terrain, worlds, like all of that is possible. But
Okay.
we're like huge, because again, like without that community, without those developers, I don't think Minecraft would be what it is today. And I think since Minecraft came out, a lot of these games saw that instead of keeping their games super restricted where the users can't do anything, instead allowing them to add all these mods, it makes the game a lot more popular.
So you've mentioned a few times that like a user could install a mod or a plugin and break stuff. As the hosting provider, if there's like a data leak, if there's like memory like just bleeding out into like that could really hurt your server or wherever they're accessing from. Is there ways to verify plugins and make sure that they're not going to break things by putting them on your server?
Yeah, so all of our servers actually run essentially in like containers, and thankfully, our billing system, where we also don't really collect any information from our customers other than like, name, email, and physical address. And the only reason we get the address is to verify, that
With Stripe
whatever.
and PayPal.
Yeah, like just for whatever method of payment we use. We don't store any of their payment information. It's all like tokenized, stored with Stripe or PayPal. And that's very completely separate from gaming servers. So like there's not really any personal data on the gaming servers, but we obviously still don't want like something bad infecting everything else. So each game is run in a container. It can't
Docker.
yeah. So there's not much that it can do. But and then we also like, there are like mods and plugins that have memory leaks where it could just start eating up your RAM. And then we do look out for that. We monitor all our nodes. Like we have tons of notifications set up for like many different things. So if we see something, if a server is crashing and it's using too much CPU, like we will stop that server, reach out to the customer, and then help them resolve that issue. Because if one server is like going crazy and crashing and using all the CPU, then it's going to affect everyone else in that node, and we don't want that happening. That's the guy in the apartment that has a water leak that's dripping into your living room.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, So I think it's we try to keep things pretty safe.
Yeah. So can you speak at all to sort of like what's to come, right? I mean, Minecraft is obviously a really popular game, and I mean, I guess it's evolving. I'm not super familiar with it, but I mean, it's not going to come out with like, the I don't know, next gen console type graphics, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's going to look like it's going to look, right? So it's growing, but it's growing in a different way where it's not, becoming more complex in like maybe a graphical way or graphical representation, but it is maybe becoming more complex in other ways. Can you talk about what the future looks like in terms of not just the game itself, but like your technology stack and how server and hosting technology is going to have to evolve and change to keep up?
Yeah, so with Minecraft, thankfully Mojang has been pretty good about releasing updates that, that are, again, keeping the community engaged. So like recently in the past few years, every time they release a big update, like the next big one is going to be 1.20. Hopefully, sometime in the summer. And we already know a lot of the stuff that's coming out because before they make these releases, they actually release like snapshots and beta versions that everyone can play and test, and which is really great because they get this huge amount of feedback from the community to find bugs and whatnot. And then they even have votes for different features. Like they've had votes for what mobs they're going to add to the game. And they had these, like, even the last one was like a big event that they hosted where everybody voted live, which is really great because then everybody picked what the newest mob should be in the game. So everybody's really excited for that. But I think overall, like, hopefully they'll keep improving with performance because for like server hosting, as the game grew and with like more recent versions, it's, requires more and more resources to run, mainly RAM. And one of the issues with Minecraft, one of the biggest issue that's always been the case is Minecraft servers are mostly single threaded. So they don't really take advantage of, multi-threaded CPUs, which can be an issue because you could have literally the best CPU in the world, overclocked, whatever, but it's still going to peg that CPU because it's only using that one core. Yeah. There are plugins and mods that make this better. There's a new one that's sort of in beta that's supposedly will make it multi-threaded. That's again done by the community, and if that happens, that would be incredible because then you can host more players easier with using less resources. For us, we just we try to keep up with seeing what our customers want, seeing what's popular, what games are coming out, and then starting to provide hosting for those. Speaking of mistakes, like you asked earlier, like one of the mistakes we made in the past is just adding up all like a bunch of games at once and then not really knowing anything about them because every game is going to have its quirks, for how it's hosted, how the mods are added, and how the settings are changed and so on. So we did that in the past, used the panel we weren't very happy with. And we ran into a ton of issues. And like, it was like a big argument between me and Andrew where I was like, look, I'm like, it sucks, but I think we need to drop all these games and just stick with Minecraft until we're better suited because I'm like, it pains me to see us providing like what I thought was bad customer support because we couldn't support the other games and our customers to the way we did Minecraft servers. So we ended up removing all those games. And now when we add a game, we add them, like one, like maybe two at a time, make sure we built out our knowledge base for it. So we have articles and videos for the game, make sure our staff is trained. So we can, better support our customers. And then we're always like looking, slowly upgrading our hardware. If there's new servers we can get that are a little bit better, we start to get those. It's, it's very hard to replace everything at once, not only because it's a huge capital cost, but telling, tens of thousands of users like, hey, we have to shut off your server because we're going to be moving you. It's just a huge undertaking. So we're kind of doing it slowly. Right now, I found some hardware that we really like that we're going to start purchasing that's, like much better than what we currently use. And I think the best thing is we're not going to tell our customers. So there are going to be a lot of, because we can't tell them until it's kind of rolled out everywhere. So, everyone will have much better hardware. And then we'll eventually announce it once, it's rolled out on a bigger scale. So we're like, I'm super excited for that. But again, it just takes a lot of time. I think like these servers, the lead times are like 8 to 12 weeks right now. So
I would assume you're competing with a lot of Bitcoin mining and AI models that are fighting for the same tech.
That reminds me, when you were asking about the safety of plugins and mods, that's one thing I forgot to say that slipped my mind is, so sometimes like not fairly recently, you can, well, I think for a few years now, where developers can charge for their plugins on this like Spigot MC website, which is great because before they were making these plugins, providing them for mostly for free, put in, thousands of hours into them. So now they can charge a little bit of money for it, which is like incredible because if they can make a little bit of money of it, they can dedicate a little bit more time for it, make it better, or make something new, keep them updated. Unfortunately, there are websites where they take these plugins, they crack them, and then they distribute them for free. And what makes it even worse, a lot of the times they'll add malicious code to these plugins. A lot of it when crypto was doing really well, we saw a lot of code that literally would mine crypto on our servers.
Yeah,
so like
I actually have heard about that, and I was wondering if you had problems. So that was one of my questions, was because if they're accessing your server and mining on the side, that's taking up a lot of resources that could be used for actual customers.
So we have like things set up for it where we get notifications if we see things like that, and we immediately stop the servers, talk to the customers, try to identify which plugin it is, tell them to remove it, and then also, like, more importantly, try to educate them. Be like, look, not only you're taking away resources from us, but you're also taking away monetary resources from the developer who should have been paid for this plugin. Because again, without these developers, Minecraft wouldn't be what it is today, or like just any other game that has a modding community. And I'm very proud that on one of these websites where you have these downloads, it literally at the top they had a whole thing where it's like, do not use BisectHosting because they don't allow, they detect and remove these.
Yeah.
I was like, thank you very much. I'm like, I am happy to see this. And we actually had then a couple of tickets that are not our customers, but we had some developers reach out and they're like, hey, we saw this on their website. Is this true? And like, I replied, I was like, yeah, that's 100%. Like, we believe developers should be paid and all that. And the guy replied, he's like, I'm actually a developer. He's like, I am so thankful, to see that and that you guys are doing this. Pretty happy for that.
Well, it's like the LimeWire back in the day, like that MP3 you downloaded could be malware or virus or this or that, same kind of concept, but they're putting it on your server instead of their personal computer. So
yeah.
Well, hey, we're almost at that time. You want to tell people where they can reach out if they have any questions or want to get in touch, or where they could go if they want to use your service?
Yeah, so our website is BisectHosting.com. We have 23 different games that we host at 20 different locations worldwide. So no matter where you are, you're able to get a low latency location. If you want to reach out to me personally, my email is just max@BisectHosting.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was enlightening. So,
yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yep. So anyway, thanks so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate you. And, we're really grateful for people like you that stop and explain this stuff for folks, because it's just, I don't think it's common knowledge for everybody. And, like even people like me, like my gaming is limited to PS5 or whatever, right? So I play online and like I've never had to think about all this stuff, right? So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely. And thanks so much to everybody who tunes into the show this week and every week. And see you guys next time.